A wild Mustang dragged the mountain man into a hidden valley, but that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that Peter Hollister had seen this exact horse dying 3 days ago, collapsed by the river with wounds no animal should survive. The black stallion stood at the edge of his camp, blood seeping from wounds that should have killed any creature. Its eyes held something Peter had never seen in 30 years of mountain living. Not fear, not aggression, but desperate intelligence. Like it knew something, like it was waiting for him specifically. Wild horses don't approach humans. That's the first rule of the mountains. They especially don't grab a man's coat sleeve with their teeth and pull, gentle but insistent, toward the treacherous northern passes. But this one did, and when Peter tried to step back, the horse blocked his path, hurting him like he was the animal. The rope burns around the Mustang's neck were fresh, deliberate, made by human hands. But there were older marks too, symbols carved into the leather collar hidden beneath its mane, symbols that matched the ones from Peter's nightmares. The horse was leading him somewhere, and somehow, Peter knew that whatever waited in that hidden valley had been waiting for him for 7 years. Peter Hollister hadn't spoken to another human in 7 years, and he planned to keep it that way. But the black Mustang standing at the edge of his camp had other plans. The horse looked exactly like the one he'd found 3 days ago near the river, collapsed and barely breathing. He'd been certain that animal was dying. But this one stood strong despite the blood seeping through its coat, rope burns raw around its neck, watching him with an intelligence that made his skin crawl. Wild horses didn't act like this. They didn't approach men who smelled of smoke and solitude. They especially didn't grab a man's sleeve with their teeth. Gentle, but insistent, pulling toward the northern passes where even experienced trackers feared to go. Peter tried to step away, but the Mustang blocked him, circling, herding him like a sheepdog would a lost lamb. There was something desperate in its movements, something that went beyond animal instinct. The horse needed him to follow. The leather collar hidden beneath its mane bore strange markings, not brands, but deliberate cuts that formed a pattern. 3 circles interlinked, with a star in the center. Peter's hand trembled as he traced them. He'd seen this symbol before, carved into the door of a burned cabin 7 years ago. The cabin where everything had ended. The Mustang pulled again, harder this time, its eyes fixed on the narrow trail leading into the canyon. Blood dripped steadily from wounds along its flanks, leaving a trail that would be easy to follow, or be followed by. Peter grabbed his rifle and pack. Every instinct screamed at him to stay in his safe, isolated camp. But something else, something he'd buried for 7 years, stirred inside him. The horse wasn't randomly wounded. Someone had tortured it, marked it, and it had come to him specifically. He thought about the other Mustang by the river. Same size, same color, but that one had a white mark on its forehead. This one didn't. Different horses then. But why had he been so certain they were the same? The black Mustang started down the trail, looking back to ensure Peter followed. The mountain man took one last look at his camp, his sanctuary from the world and its pain, then followed the bleeding horse into the canyon. As they descended, Peter noticed something that made his blood run cold. The horse's wounds weren't random. They formed a map across its hide, each cut deliberately placed. Someone had carved directions into this animal's flesh. The canyon narrowed, walls rising on either side until only a strip of sky remained visible. The Mustang moved faster now, urgent, stumbling occasionally but pushing forward. They were heading somewhere specific, somewhere hidden, and Peter had the sinking feeling that whatever waited at the end of this blood trail had been waiting for him for a very long time. The hidden valley opened before them like a wound in the mountain. Peter had lived in these ranges for 7 years and never knew this place existed. The Mustang collapsed the moment they passed through the narrow entrance, its duty apparently done. Peter knelt beside the animal, checking its wounds. The cuts were precise, intentional, but not fatal if treated. Someone had hurt this horse just enough to make it desperate, just enough to make it seek help. But why lead it to him? A movement in the shadows made him reach for his rifle. A woman emerged from behind a cluster of rocks, her dress torn, her dark hair wild around her face. She held a knife in one hand and a child's hand in the other. The girl, maybe 8 years old, stared at him with eyes that held too much knowledge for her age. "You're Peter Hollister," the woman said. Not a question, a statement. He hadn't heard his name spoken aloud in 7 years. It sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Someone who had died in a burning cabin along with everything he'd loved. "How do you know who I am?" The same way I knew you'd come if we sent the horse. Dakota Quinn lowered the knife slightly but didn't put it away. We've been waiting 3 days. I was starting to think you wouldn't follow. Peter looked between her and the Mustang. You did this? You carved up this animal? I marked it with directions. Surface cuts only. It was the only way. Her voice cracked slightly. They're coming. The men who killed my husband. They'll be here by nightfall, maybe sooner. The child hadn't made a sound, hadn't moved except to press closer to Dakota's side. Peter noticed bruises on the girl's arms, the kind that came from being grabbed too hard. Too often. She doesn't speak, Dakota said, following his gaze. Not since she saw what they did to her father. Peter stood slowly, scanning the valley. One entrance, steep walls on all sides. A death trap if those men found them here. Why me? Why not go to the nearest town? Because the nearest town is where they're from. Dakota's laugh was bitter. Because everyone there is either bought or scared. Because you're the only one within 100 miles who has nothing left to lose. That hit him like a physical blow. She was right, of course. He had nothing. Had made sure of it. But how could she know that? There's more, Dakota said, glancing at the child. She saw something she shouldn't have. Something about a land deal and dead homesteaders. They can't let her live, even if she can't speak about it. The Mustang struggled to its feet, wobbling toward a small spring at the valley's center. Peter watched it drink, noticed how its wounds had already stopped bleeding. Dakota knew exactly what she was doing with that knife. I can't help you, he said, even as his mind cataloged defensive positions in the valley. I came to these mountains to be alone. No, Dakota said quietly. You came here to hide. There's a difference. Before he could respond, the child tugged on Dakota's dress and pointed toward the valley entrance. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Dust was rising in the distance. Riders. Coming fast. 3 riders. Peter counted them through the dust, his mind already calculating angles and distances. The valley's narrow entrance was both a blessing and a curse. They could only come through one at a time. But there was also no other way out. Behind the rocks, he ordered, his voice rough from years of disuse. Dakota grabbed the child and moved without question, her survival instincts sharp. The Mustang limped after them, understanding danger even through its pain. Peter positioned himself behind a boulder near the entrance. Rifle steady. He hadn't held a weapon with intent to use it in 7 years. His hands didn't shake, though. Some things the body never forgets. The riders stopped just outside the valley entrance. Peter could hear their voices carrying on the wind. Horse blood leads right in there, Garrett, one said. She's trapped herself good. Could be a trap, another voice argued. That woman's clever. Clever enough to steal what don't belong to her, the first man, Garrett, replied. That girl saw too much. Both of them did. Boss wants this cleaned up quiet. Peter glanced back at Dakota. She was pressed against the rock face. The child clutched to her chest. But her eyes weren't fearful. They were calculating, planning. This wasn't a woman paralyzed by terror. This was someone who'd been running long enough to know when to fight. The first rider entered the valley, pistol drawn. Peter recognized the type. Hired muscle. Probably killed before, but not a professional. The man's eyes swept the rocks looking for movement. He didn't notice Peter until the rifle barrel was already aimed at his chest. Drop the gun, Peter said quietly. The man froze, then slowly complied. You don't know what you're stepping into. Friend. I'm nobody's friend. Peter kept his voice steady. Tell your men to back away. Can't do that. The man's hand twitched toward a second gun. That woman has something that don't belong to her. Papers. Proof of things that can't come to light. Dakota's voice rang out from behind the rocks. Proof that your boss has been killing homesteaders and stealing their land claims. My husband died trying to expose him. The rider laughed, harsh and ugly. Your husband died because he couldn't mind his own business. Just like you're about to. The child suddenly broke free from Dakota's grip, running toward the valley's center. Not in panic, but with purpose. She dropped to her knees by a pile of stones and began digging frantically with her small hands. Get the girl! Garrett shouted from outside. The rider in the valley moved toward the child. Peter had a split second to decide. Maintain his defensive position or protect the girl. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. He moved from cover, keeping his rifle trained on the rider. Stay back. The man smiled, cold and knowing. There's 3 of us and 1 of you, mountain man. You sure you want to die for strangers? Peter thought about the burned cabin, about another child he'd failed to protect, about 7 years of hiding from that failure. "I'm sure I don't want to live with watching another child die," he said. The child pulled something from the ground, an oilskin packet, carefully buried. She held it up triumphantly, then ran back toward Dakota. That's when the other two riders rushed the entrance. The valley erupted into chaos. Peter's first shot went wide as he dove for cover, pulling the child with him. Dakota had grabbed the oilskin packet and was already moving, using the rocks for cover like someone who'd done this before. The three men spread out, trying to flank them. Peter could hear Garrett shouting orders, coordinating their movements. These weren't random thugs. They'd hunted people before. "Give us the papers and we'll make it quick," Garrett called out. "No need for the child to suffer." Dakota's response was a thrown rock that caught one rider in the temple, dropping him to his knees. She'd pitched it with the accuracy of someone who'd grown up hunting small game. Peter realized he'd underestimated her from the beginning. The wounded Mustang did something unexpected then. It charged at the nearest rider, screaming its wild fury, hooves striking out. The man stumbled backward, firing wildly. One bullet grazed Peter's shoulder, spinning him around. Through the pain, Peter saw Dakota moving. She'd gotten behind one of the fallen riders and had his gun. The woman who'd seemed so desperate was now deadly calm, her aim steady as she covered the child's retreat toward the valley's far wall. "There's another way out," she shouted to Peter. "Behind the waterfall. My husband found it weeks ago." Peter's mind raced. If there was another exit, why hadn't she used it? Unless she'd needed him here. Needed someone who could fight. The horse hadn't randomly found him. She'd sent it, knowing somehow that he'd follow. "You knew," he said, even as he fired at Garrett, forcing the man to take cover. "You knew who I was." "How?" "Your wife's sister," Dakota said, not taking her eyes off the approaching men. "Rebecca Quinn. She was my cousin. She wrote about you, about what happened. Said if anything ever happened to her, to find Peter Hollister in the mountains." The name hit him like a physical blow. Rebecca. She'd been there that night. Had died in the fire along with... He pushed the memory down. This wasn't the time. The child had reached the far wall and was pointing urgently at something hidden behind a curtain of rock. A passage, barely visible. "Go!" Peter shouted to Dakota. "Take her and go!" "Not without you." Dakota's voice was fierce. "Rebecca saved my life once. I'm not leaving her brother-in-law to die." Brother-in-law. The words twisted in his gut. She didn't know the whole truth. Didn't know that the fire had been meant for him. That his past had killed them all. Garrett had circled around, was getting closer. The man he'd wounded was back on his feet. They were running out of ammunition and options. The Mustang, bloodied but unbroken, stood between them and the attackers. Peter made a decision. He grabbed Dakota's arm. "When I say run, you take that child and those papers, and you don't look back. What are you going to do?" Peter looked at the horse. At the narrow entrance, at the men closing in. What I should have done 7 years ago. Fight instead of run. He turned to the child, who watched him with those knowing eyes. For a moment, he could have sworn she smiled. Then he stood up from cover, rifle raised, and walked straight toward the men who'd come to kill them. Peter walked toward the gunman with the steady pace of a man who'd already died once. 7 years of hiding had ended in this moment, and there was something almost peaceful about it. "That's far enough," Garrett said, gun trained on Peter's chest. "Drop the rifle." Peter let it fall. Behind him, he could hear Dakota trying to get the child through the passage behind the waterfall. They needed time. He could give them that. "You're the hermit," Garrett said, recognition dawning. "The one from the old Hollister place fire. Thought you were dead." "I was." Peter kept his hands visible, unthreatening. "For 7 years, I was." The wounded rider laughed, blood running from where Dakota's rock had split his scalp. "Well, you're about to be dead for real. Boss don't like loose ends." "Your boss," Peter said slowly, "is Samuel Brennan, isn't he? The land commissioner." The men exchanged glances. He'd hit the mark. "Those papers the woman has," Peter continued. "They prove he's been killing homesteaders, filing false claims. Selling the land to the railroad. Smart man," Garrett said. "Too smart to live." The Mustang suddenly staggered between them, its legs finally giving out. The magnificent animal collapsed in the dust, breathing hard, blood pooling beneath it. Peter felt something break inside his chest. This creature had given everything to bring him here. "Shame about the horse," the third rider said. "Worth good money if it hadn't been cut up." Peter knelt beside the Mustang, his hand on its neck. The horse's eye met his, and in that moment, Peter understood something. Dakota hadn't just randomly chosen him. She'd known about his gift with horses, how he'd once been the best horse trainer in 3 territories. She'd known he wouldn't be able to ignore a wounded animal. "Tell Brennan something for me," Peter said, still kneeling by the horse. "Tell him Rebecca Quinn kept copies of everything, not just what's in that packet. Letters, deeds, witness statements. It's all in the bank in Cedar Ridge in a safety deposit box." It was a lie, but Garrett didn't know that. The man's eyes narrowed, calculating. "You're bluffing. Rebecca was my sister-in-law. She was smart enough to protect herself. Why do you think Brennan had her killed in that fire?" Peter stood slowly. "You kill us, those documents go public, the bank has instructions." From behind the waterfall, he heard a splash. Dakota and the child had found the passage. They were getting away. "Just a little more time. We could make a deal," Garrett said after a moment. "You get us those documents, we let you disappear again. Like you let Tom Quinn disappear? Like the Morrison family? The Hendersons?" Peter shook his head. "I've hidden long enough." The Mustang made a sound, low and pained. Peter looked down at it, saw the intelligence still burning in its eyes despite the pain. The horse was trying to get up, hooves scrabbling in the dirt. "Stay down." "Boy," Peter whispered. But the horse didn't listen. With tremendous effort, it lurched to its feet one final time, standing between Peter and the gunman, swaying, bloodied but unbroken. That's when Peter heard it. Horses approaching. Many horses. The thunder of hooves echoing off the canyon walls. Garrett heard it too. His face went pale. "You brought help?" Peter was just as surprised, but he didn't show it. "Did you really think I'd come alone?" The riders burst into the valley. 8 men wearing badges, led by a grizzled marshal Peter recognized from years ago. Marshal Jim Dalton, one of the few honest lawmen left in the territory. "Drop your weapons," Dalton commanded. "Garrett Lynch, you're under arrest for murder." Garrett's face twisted with rage. "You set us up." "Not me," Peter said, genuinely surprised. Then he understood. Dakota hadn't just been running. She'd been leading these men here, using herself and the child as bait to draw them out. The horse finding Peter hadn't been her only plan. It had been her backup plan. "The woman reached out to me 3 days ago," Dalton said, his men surrounding Garrett's group. "Said she had proof about the Quinn murder and others. Just needed to catch you boys in the act of trying to silence witnesses." Garrett made a desperate move for his gun. The wounded Mustang, with the last of its strength, struck out with its front hooves, catching the man in the chest and sending him sprawling. The gun flew from his hand, landing in the dust. "Don't move!" Dalton's men had their rifles trained on the remaining 2 riders, who slowly raised their hands. Dakota emerged from behind the waterfall, the child at her side, the oilskin packet in her hands. She walked straight to the marshal and handed it over. "Everything's in there, maps showing which homesteads were targeted, Brennan's own handwriting ordering the killings. Tom made copies of everything before they killed him." The child tugged at Dakota's dress and pointed at Garrett. Then, for the first time, she spoke, her voice small but clear. "He's the one who hurt Papa. I saw him." Everyone froze. The girl who'd been mute from trauma had found her voice at the crucial moment. "Lily," Dakota knelt beside her. "You can speak?" The girl nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared. But the mountain man is here now. Papa said if we ever needed help, find the mountain man with sad eyes. He'd protect us." Peter's chest tightened. Tom Quinn had known who he was, had told his daughter about him. How many people had Rebecca told about him over the years? How many had known he was alive up in these mountains, drowning in guilt? "Peter Hollister," Marshal Dalton said. "We've been looking for you too. Not for what you think. Rebecca Quinn left something for you. A letter. Said only to deliver it if you ever came down from the mountains. I don't want—" "She knew the fire wasn't your fault," Dalton interrupted. "Brennan's men said it. You were supposed to die that night, not them. Rebecca figured it out, was gathering evidence when they came for her. The weight Peter had carried for 7 years shifted, cracked, but didn't quite break. Not yet. The Mustang collapsed again, and this time Peter knew it wouldn't get back up. He knelt beside the brave animal, stroking its neck as its breathing slowed. Dakota joined him, the little girl's hand in hers. "You saved us all," Dakota whispered to the horse. "You brought him to us." The Mustang's eyes found Peter's one last time, then slowly closed. The magnificent creature that had dragged him from his isolation was gone. "We need to move," Dalton said quietly. "Brennan will know something's wrong when his men don't report back. We need to get you all somewhere safe before he runs." Peter stood, looking at Dakota and the child. His self-imposed exile was over. But what came next? They rode hard toward town, Peter on a borrowed horse, feeling exposed after 7 years of hiding. Dakota rode beside him with Lily secured in front of her. The child hadn't stopped talking since finding her voice, describing everything she'd witnessed with the clarity that only a child's memory could provide. "Mr. Brennan came to our house that night," Lily said. "Papa showed him papers. Then Mr. Brennan got real quiet and told that man," she pointed at Garrett, tied and riding with the marshal's men, "to fix the problem." Marshal Dalton rode up alongside Peter. "Brennan's probably at his office. Man's too arrogant to run. Thinks his money and connections will protect him. They always have before," Peter said bitterly. "Not this time. That packet has enough evidence to hang him twice over." Tom Quinn was thorough. Maps, forged deeds, even a confession from one of Brennan's men who got religion before dying. They crested the hill overlooking the town. Peter's breath caught. It had grown in 7 years, buildings spreading like a disease across what had once been open range. Brennan's work, stealing land, selling it, getting rich on blood. There, Dakota pointed to a 3-story building dominating Main Street. Brennan Land Commission, painted in gold letters across the front. "Peter," Dakota said quietly, "I need to tell you something. Rebecca didn't just write about you. She came to see you 2 weeks before the fire, but you were gone, hunting. She left something at your cabin." "What?" "A warning. She knew Brennan was planning something. She tried to save you all." Dakota's voice cracked. "She loved her sister more than anything. Your wife was her whole world after their parents died." Peter's throat tightened. Rebecca had tried to warn them. If he'd been home that day, if he'd gotten the message. "Stop," Dakota said firmly. "Tom did the same thing. Blamed himself for not seeing Brennan's nature sooner. Guilt doesn't bring them back. Justice might give them peace." They dismounted outside the marshal's office. Dalton sent men to surround Brennan's building while he prepared the arrest warrant. Peter stood in the street, feeling the weight of 7 years crushing down on him. The last time he'd stood on this street, he'd been a different man. A husband, a father. Peter Hollister. He turned. Samuel Brennan stood 20 feet away, flanked by 2 hired guns. The land commissioner hadn't changed much, still wearing expensive suits, still carrying himself like he owned the world, because he nearly did. "Heard you were dead," Brennan said casually. "Shame about your family. Terrible accident, that fire. We both know it wasn't an accident." Brennan smiled. "Cold as winter. Proving that might be difficult. My lawyers are very good. Not good enough." Peter held up the packet. Tom Quinn made sure of that. The smile faltered. Brennan's eyes went to his men, calculating. The street had gone quiet. Townspeople sensing trouble, disappearing into buildings. "That belongs to me," Brennan said. "Tom Quinn stole private documents. He copied documents that proved you're a murderer." Peter stepped forward. "The Morrisons, the Hendersons, the Clarks, my wife, my daughter, Rebecca. You can't prove—" "He's the one." Lily's voice rang out clear and strong. She stood beside Dakota, pointing at Brennan. "He's the one who gave the order. I was hiding under Papa's desk. I heard everything. He said to make it look like an accident, just like the Hollister fire." Brennan's hired guns reached for their weapons. Peter moved faster than he had in 7 years, the packet flying from his hands as he tackled Dakota and Lily to the ground. Gunfire erupted, but Marshal Dalton's men were ready. They swarmed from the alleyways, surrounding Brennan's group. "Drop them," Dalton commanded. One hired gun complied. The other made the mistake of raising his weapon toward the marshal. 3 rifles fired simultaneously. The man crumpled to the dirt. Brennan stood frozen, his careful empire collapsing in seconds. "You can't prove anything. The word of a child, a traumatized woman, a hermit, and a dying confession," Dalton said, producing another document. "Jake Winters found religion in his final days. Wrote down everything. Every murder you ordered. Every family you destroyed. He even drew a map to where you buried the Hendersons." Peter stood, helping Dakota and Lily to their feet. The little girl clung to his leg, trembling but brave. He put his hand on her head, protective. "It's over, Brennan," Peter said quietly. Brennan's face contorted with rage. "You took everything from me." "No," Peter replied. You took everything from us. Our families, our homes, our lives. And for what? Money? Land you'll never live to enjoy? Brennan pulled a hidden derringer from his vest, aiming at Peter. Time slowed. Peter saw the finger squeeze the trigger, saw the flash of powder. He shoved Dakota and Lily aside, expecting the impact. The shot went wide. Brennan looked down in shock at the knife protruding from his shoulder. Dakota stood 10 feet away, her throwing arm still extended. The same accuracy that had dropped a man with a rock had now saved Peter's life. Brennan dropped the derringer, falling to his knees. Marshal Dalton's men seized him, yanking him to his feet despite his wounded shoulder. Samuel Brennan, Dalton announced loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. You're under arrest for the murders of Tom Quinn, Elizabeth Hollister, Mary Hollister, Rebecca Quinn, and 11 others. You'll hang for this. As they dragged Brennan away, he locked eyes with Peter. You think you've won. You still lost everything. Peter looked at Dakota, her fierce protectiveness. At Lily, finding courage despite her trauma. At the town witnesses who'd finally see justice done. At the spot where the brave Mustang had died to bring them together. No, Peter said. I lost everything 7 years ago. Today, I found a reason to live again. The crowd dispersed slowly. Justice witnessed. Dakota approached Peter, Lily's hand in hers. What will you do now? She asked. Peter looked at the mountains in the distance, then back at them. 2 people who needed protection, stability, a chance to heal. Tom's ranch will need someone to run it. Keep it safe for Lily when she's grown. That's not an answer to my question, Dakota said softly. For the first time in 7 years, Peter allowed himself a small smile. I spent 7 years dying in those mountains. Maybe it's time I tried living again. If you'll have me around. Lily tugged his sleeve. The Mustang brought you to us for a reason, Mr. Peter. Papa always said the mountain man would protect us. Will you? Peter knelt to her level. Always. Dakota's hand found his shoulder. Not romantic. Not yet. But a connection. A beginning. 3 broken people who might heal together. The sun set over the town as Samuel Brennan was locked in the jail that had held his victims. Justice had come to the valley, brought by a wild Mustang, a brave woman, a traumatized child, and a man who'd finally stopped running from his ghosts. Peter Hollister had gone into the mountains to die. He came down them to live. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where courage meets destiny in the untamed frontier. Don't forget to subscribe and consider leaving a super chat to help us keep bringing you more incredible stories. Your support means everything.